Peace be with you. My name is Mary Beth Morgan,
I'm Jimmy Moore.
and we are blessed to serve as pastors at St. Mark's United Methodist Church here in Bloomington, Indiana, and we are glad that you are with us this evening. We also would hope that you might be able to join us on Easter Sunday, just a couple days from now, for our Easter service, which will be at 10:30 in the morning, and you can join us on the live stream. From wherever you are joining us this evening, we are coming together as one community for our Good Friday service.
And if you receive email from St. Mark's, you would have received the order of worship for this service just a couple of days ago. And so basically the service is constructed around the 7 sayings of Jesus that we collect from the 4 Gospels. Every now and then you'll see them in a slightly different order, but we will go through those, and each one will be followed by a reflection. Some of them are musical reflections. We'll have several reflections offered by some of our members here, including Liz McDaniel, Maria Schmidt, and Sonia Lee, and those are really very powerful. Mary Beth and I will also respond to some of those. And then one of our responses is from our chancel ringers. After this long year, they've gotten the band back together, and we're really looking forward. And tonight, ringing is Anthony Joseph, Katie Matson, Lisa Kurtz, Mary Beth Hannah Hansen, Ed Brandon, Patrick Conklin, and Nara Lee. This is a time in which we invite you to give yourself to reflection and to deep prayer as we move into this service on Good Friday. I'll ask the singers now to come up as we move into our time of call to worship. Do you hear them, the crusty voices around the cross? Soldiers doing what they had been told to do, wondering at this death. Do you hear them, brutish ones scoffing at one they fear? Vengeful leaders and condemned ones, missing the goodness in their very presence. Do you hear them, the broken-hearted ones standing near? A mother and friends witnessing unimaginable loss. Do you hear them, the words of Jesus in his last hours? Hear them tonight. There is blessing in them. May we join together for our opening hymn, When I Survey the Wondrous Cross.
Oh The reading is from Matthew, chapter 27, verses 27 through 31, and Luke, chapter 23, verses 32 through 34. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the governor's headquarters, and they gathered the whole cohort around him. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on his head. They put a reed in his right hand and knelt before him and mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" They spat on him and took the reed and struck him on the head. After mocking him, they stripped him of the robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him away to crucify him. 2 others also, who were criminals, were led away to be put to death with him. When they came to the place that is called the Skull, they crucified Jesus there with the criminals, one on his right and one on his left. Then Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." I have thought long and hard about forgiveness for the last couple of years. Forgiveness was a bit of a foreign concept in my family growing up, somehow equated with giving permission for a wrong to persist without any consequences. Instead, we assigned blame, held grudges, and kept score. It's not surprising, then, that to me, truly forgiving someone sometimes seems just too much to take on. That reluctance to go there comes at a cost, like avoiding a difficult task or opportunity for growth inevitably does. Anne Lamott describes the price we pay in her unique way. Not forgiving someone is like drinking rat poison and expecting the rat to die. So we have a choice. Keep drinking the poison or find a path that might lead to forgiveness. Perhaps this journey can begin with smaller, more manageable steps. In her blog, Carrie Newcomer writes about kindness as a step on the path to love. What if compassion is a step on the path to forgiveness? Substituting forgiveness for love and compassion for kindness in Carrie's blog post, we get, we talk a lot about forgiveness, but sometimes I think that talking about forgiveness can be so big and overwhelming. Forgiveness is a concept that sometimes feels too wide to get my very human arms around. But compassion is doable. Compassion is small and daily. It is not big or flashy. It is the humble cup of water that we dip up from that deep, wide river of forgiveness and simply give away. Compassion might involve a silent acknowledgement that some trauma in another's past is running his life. Compassion could be making peace with the idea that someone's behavior is not personal and malicious, just a result of different emotional wiring or worldview. Self-compassion is perhaps the most difficult of all, especially when it involves a younger version of oneself. The path to forgiveness likely requires us to give up something too, the need to be right and make someone else wrong, the wall of hurts and grudges that we push in front of us as we engage with the world, our self-righteousness. Letting go could make room for compassion and maybe, just maybe, forgiveness to show up. Returning to Anne Lamott, forgiveness is giving up all hope of having had a better past. Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. Why not I forgive them? Was Jesus unable to forgive those who were torturing him? Would his request have been different if the soldiers knew exactly what they were doing? Curiosity aside, the answers to these questions is unimportant. Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing, is actually a prayer for all of us. As is my custom, I will close with a poem by John O'Donohue. For someone who did you wrong. Though its way is to strike in a dumb rhythm, stroke upon stroke, as though the heart were an anvil, the hurt you sent had a mind of its own. Something in you knew exactly how to shape it, to hit the target, slipping into the heart through some wound window left open since childhood. While it struck outside, it burrowed inside, made tunnels through every ground of confidence. For days it would lie still until a thought would start it. Meanwhile, you forgot, went on with things, and never even knew how that perfect shape of hurt still continued to work. Now a new kindness seems to have entered time, and I can see how that hurt has schooled my heart in a compassion I would otherwise have never learned. Somehow, now, I have begun to glimpse the unexpected fruit that your dark gift had planted, and I thank you for your unknown work.
The second word, here a reading from Luke chapter 23. And the people stood by watching, but the leaders scoffed at him, saying, "He saved others. Let him save himself if he is the Messiah of God, the chosen one." The soldiers also mocked him, coming up and offer him sour wine and saying, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." There was also an inscription over him, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals who were hanged there kept deriding him, saying, "Are you not the Messiah? Save yourself and us." But the other rebuked him, saying, "Do you not fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation? And we indeed have been condemned justly, for we are getting what we deserve for our deeds. But this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." He replied, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." Now Lisa Kurtz, accompanied by Nora, will sing, "Were You There?"
23 through 29 from the Inclusive Bible. After the soldiers had crucified Jesus, they took his clothing and divided it into 4 pieces, 1 piece for each soldier. They also took the seamless robe. The soldiers said to one another, "Let's not tear it. We can throw dice to see who will get it." This happened in order to fulfill the scripture. They divided my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. And this is what they did. Standing close to Jesus' cross were his mother's sister Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary of Magdala. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciples whom he loved standing there, he said to his mother, "Here is your son." And he said to his disciples, "Here is your mother." From that moment, the disciples took her into his household. It is hard to enter the darkness of the Good Friday story. The arc of this week has brought us low, and it has not just been a week, but more than a year. We are tired. Our batteries are drained. Good Friday is not the spiritual practice we want. Right now, in fact, even in a typical year, we try to avoid this day. We want only love and light. I think if we look closely, we find love at the foot of the cross. Good Friday, a day with suffering and tears, has become the norm rather than the exception. For 2,000 years, mothers have watched their sons be arrested, tried, condemned, and die at the hands of the system. The violent death of husbands and sons and nephews and partners and friends and teachers and disciples at the hands of the domination system has moved beyond ancient history. I ask, what has made this okay? We need more than thoughts and prayers to change this narrative. We need witnesses who will move to action, and that is exactly who was at the foot of the cross. The witnesses standing close to Jesus' cross, as noted in the scripture, were his mother and his aunt, as well as Mary of Magdala, who some scholars say was the apostle to the apostles, the foremost witness and future storyteller, the one who at the resurrection is commissioned to tell the others, and who then tasks the disciples to spread the word. Oops, I moved to Sunday. Let's back up. The witnesses. What if, on this day, instead of the typical glossing over of the presence of women at Jesus' death, we focus on the faithfulness of these individuals? What if, instead of emphasizing that Jesus died alone and rejected, we reinforce that the women stood by him and did not leave? Focus on those who remained. I would argue that this paradigm changes the tone for the day. Some commentators argue that they were only there because as women at the cross witnessing the crucifixion, they were less likely to be suspected by the authorities of being dangerous subversives. I prefer John Dominic Crossan's focus from his book, The Last Week. Crossan says that Jesus gave women an identity and status that they did not experience within the conventional wisdom of the time. These women assisted Jesus throughout his entire ministry, the steady, unwavering disciples and witnesses to Jesus' work and now his death by the system that oppresses. So that is why they were there and why they stayed. Cynthia Bourgeault notes in her book, The Meaning of Mary Magdalene, Discovering the Women at the Heart of Christianity, that this story is about the women who stayed to the end. Although Bourgeault notes, for those women, it was anything but an end. They remained to wait a new, frightening dawn that would propel them into a mission transcending all other missionary endeavors recorded in gospel lore. At the foot of the cross are the faithful women who had the deepest understanding of Jesus' teaching. They got the message, turning the empire upside down, but more than that, a transformation. The transformative missionary endeavor was that it is to see the violent domination system of the cross destroyed and replaced with the unwavering redemptive love of God. These women, these disciples, had the strength and ability to live out what they had been working for, to sow love more deeply and more vastly. Bourgeault continues, it is love standing at the foot of the cross, Love following the small entourage that takes his body from the cross and places it in the tomb. Love holding vigil when everyone else has gone home. Love of a mother, love of an aunt, and the love of a dedicated disciple, maybe the most beloved of Jesus' disciples, Mary of Magdala. This Good Friday, as a time for witnessing Jesus' final words in this portion of John's Gospel, are about God's unwavering love being shown by the women present, and then Jesus gathering those disciples together one last time. Here is your mother, here is your son. And the community of love was transformed, a community that opens the table wider, that gathers, that gives voice, that includes, that is open to everyone. Holy Week stories are not about the past, they are about the present. We must not be afraid to stay at the foot of the cross. Yes, we will grieve the losses of our sons and daughters. Let us not focus on the domination in our despair, but on witnessing the love, just as Jesus asked. I will close with words from a poem by Sarah R. And there, in all our beautiful God-given honesty, we say to that monster, I have love on my side, and her name is God, and I believe. It will be the bravest thing you ever do, and your knees might shake, and you might lose your way, but our God is a God of second chances. So take my hand, and I say, let's hold hands together, let's stay at the foot of the cross and witness. Amen.
Good evening. I'll be reading from Mark 15:33 to 34. When it was noon, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. At 3 o'clock, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? This year, as I remember Jesus on the cross and the suffering he experienced there, I'd like to reflect on the gift of Jesus as God the incarnate, the one who understands my sorrows, my grief, and my despair, and does not use my suffering to pathologize me or have contempt on me, but one who has mercy, empathizes, and sits with me in this feeling of being abandoned by others. There are so many sorrows that we have all carried this past year. The 2.8 million people who have died of COVID across the world, the number of people of color who have died unjustly at the hands of state-sanctioned violence, and now the shocking number of people who are dying as a result of senseless mass shootings. But today, as I think of Jesus as the God who humbled himself to humanity, to being present with us even in death, I'd like to remember the 8 people who were killed at the mass shootings in Atlanta on March 16th of this year. Because for me, as an Asian American woman, the targeting of these Asian women's bodies signals a truth that I don't want to face, but that I must face: the hypersexualization and the dehumanization of all Asian women. So I'd like to visualize Jesus as the one who understands and sits with the 8 victims as they were being killed, as well as their family members who are now mourning their loss. My God, why have you forsaken me? Cries Sharjah Tan and her daughter, Jamie Webb, and her ex-husband, Michael Webb. My God, why have you forsaken me? Cries Delana Ashley Yuan, who left behind a 13-year-old son and an 8-month-old baby. She was getting a couple's massage with her husband, Mario, who was in a different room and was able to escape. My God, why have you forsaken me? Cries her husband, Mario, who survived but was handcuffed and was treated by the police officers as a suspect for 2 hours, even though he kept on asking them, where's my wife? Where's my wife? My God, why have you forsaken me? Cries Paul Andrew Michaels. My God, why have you forsaken me? Cries Dao Yu Feng. My God, why have you forsaken me? Cries Sunja Kim and her surviving granddaughter Regina Song, who no longer receive weekly phone calls from her grandmother, who used to tell her, stay strong in life. When you're happy, I'm happy. My God, why have you forsaken me? Cries Sunjung Park, a 74-year-old Korean American woman who used to make food for the employees of Gold Spa and worked 2 other jobs to provide for her family. My God, why have you forsaken me? Cries Youngye Yu and her 2 sons, Robert and Elliot Peterson. My God, why have you forsaken me? Cries Hyunjung Kim, whose surviving son, Randy Park, who is 22 years old, is thankful for the $2 million he was able to raise in less than 24 hours through a GoFundMe page, but who doesn't know how to live without her. He says he's a train wreck at night when he's alone. The story of this family in particular breaks my heart the most because I look so much like this young woman, and I also have 2 kids. My heart breaks every time I imagine what my children would be going through now if they were to lose me in such a horrific tragedy. My God, why have you forsaken me? Cries Robert Long. As much as American society seeks to punish you and see you only as a criminal or a sex addict, I remember that Jesus was merciful to the criminals who were next to him at the time of his crucifixion. When one of them asked him, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom," Jesus said, "I tell you the truth. Today you will be with me in paradise." Sadly, I don't see the church representing this radical love that Jesus offered to criminals in a meaningful way. His love offered forgiveness, but also required total transformation of the heart. But Jesus' love is not dead. I see it in the vision being articulated by secular prison and police abolitionists, people like Mariam Kaba, who insist that we should not dichotomize the world between victims and perpetrators because, quote, "the world is more complex than that. In a particular situation, we're victimized, and in other situations, we're the people that perpetrate harm. We have to be able to hold all those things together," unquote. So as I sit on this Good Friday with the weight of knowing that I am both a victim and perpetrator in the world that I navigate, I ask God, my God, will you be with me? Will you be my shield and my defender? Next time I have to second guess my interaction with a man because I am now overly conscious of the fact that my body is hypersexualized and assumed to be available for sexual consumption, or will you forsake me? My God, will I stand with you next time I see you in the body of an Asian American who gets told to, quote, freaking leave this country, or in the body of a woman, or anybody really who is not a hetero cisgender man who gets told that they are not worthy of their full beauty, protection, and dignity? Or will I forsake them too?
The fifth word. After this, when Jesus knew that all was finished, he said, in order to fulfill the Scriptures, I am thirsty. Have you ever been really thirsty? The Gospel of John moves back and forth between literal meaning and metaphor so quickly you can't keep up. Nicodemus, an old man, must be born again. Bread to eat, bread of life. Someone, their sight is restored. Jesus is the light of the world. Water and wine, thirst and water. And one of the mistakes with metaphor is moving too quickly to it. Water matters. Literal, dripping, splashing, slurpable water. Our bodies, they tell us, are 60% water. And in my long ago sports career, I became in a football game dehydrated in the Mississippi August heat and experienced cramping muscles, 6 at one time, the fronts of my thighs, my hamstrings in both legs, and my calves in both legs. Then when I was visiting missions in Haiti and Guatemala, I saw the utter importance of having clean water. Every year, over 3 million people die from preventable waterborne disease. Most of those are children. And in America, one American toilet flush uses as much water as the average person in a developing country uses for a whole day's drinking, cooking, washing, and cleaning. And when grieving, some people literally dehydrate because they forget to drink. Water, real water, matters. Jesus was really thirsty. Crucifixion was cruel, vicious torture. The Gospels tell us that Jesus, early in this process, refused the draught of wine and myrrh that was given to keep people from suffering too much, to put them to sleep. He chose to be awake. But here, toward the end of the story, he accepts the drink, bringing to mind maybe the words he said to the disciples, "Are you able to drink the cup I am going to drink?" And perhaps the prayer, "If you will, let this cup pass, but your will be done." This thirst, though physical, was also a thirst for God. As the psalmist wrote, "As the deer longs for flowing streams, so my soul longs for you, O God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God." So the Church of Jesus is really the community of the thirsty. Together, we thirst for the water of life. Barbara Brown Taylor, in a sermon about the woman on the well, tells of a time when she and her husband Ed moved to the country and broke with city water and moved to well water. But one year the well ran dry. They were pretty adaptable folks, so they found water for most of their needs. But to clean their clothes, she headed toward the laundromat in the small town. She wrote, "I had finally come to the village like the woman at the well. I watched Spanish-speaking children use the laundry carts like skateboards. I learned from the carnies at the fair to put Coca-Cola on tough stains before washing them. A man brought surplus cucumbers, tomatoes, and zucchini to share. Another man brought toys for the children." She writes, "I learned that having my own well is no substitute to having neighbors. There is no such thing as my water or your water, only our water. If Jesus had had Fiji water in his backpack, or the woman had a spigot at her house, they never would have met." Jesus, the thirsty one, the one who tells us how to get a drink. Are you thirsty? Mary Oliver writes, "Another morning and I wake with thirst for the goodness I do not have. I walk out to the pond, and all the way God has given us such beautiful lessons. Oh Lord, I was never a quick scholar, but sulked and hunched over my books past the hour and the bell. Grant me in your mercy a little more time. Love for the earth and love for you are having such a long conversation in my heart. Who knows what will happen or where I will be sent, yet already I have given a great many things away, expecting to be told to pack nothing except the prayers which with this thirst I am slowly learning." We are the community of the thirsty. Craig Barnes tells about a funeral, closing with this, over which he presided for a relatively young woman who left behind a 9-year-old son, who spoke at the funeral. Craig said, "I can still see him standing dutifully behind the podium, stretching up toward the microphone like a brave little soldier. He read from the papers in his hands. Thank you for being here today to say goodbye to my mother, who's gone to heaven. I want you to know a couple of things that my sister and I will miss about Mommy. We will miss the way she always greeted us when we got home from school. She will be in the kitchen. She would be in the kitchen and we would run into her arms and it felt so good to be home. I'm going to miss that. At nighttime, when we had to go to bed, she would race us to our beds and then we'd jump in and have tickling contest. And she would read us a story. I'm going to miss that too. Then he folded up his piece of paper, stuffed it in his pocket, and sat down. That was a little boy saying, I am thirsty. And this thirst will shape much of his remaining life. Jesus said, I am thirsty. So are we. May our thirst bring us to God and to each other. Amen. The sixth word from John chapter 19, verses 29 and 30. A jar full of sour wine was standing there, so they put a sponge full of the wine on a branch of hyssop and held it to his mouth. When Jesus received the wine, he said, It is finished. Then he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. I invite now the singers who to come forward, and they will sing, accompanied by Nora, an arrangement of O Sacred Head, arranged by our own Jerry Sousa.
Thank you.
The seventh word comes from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 23, verses 44 to 46. It was now about noon, and the darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m, when the sun's light failed, and the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Then Jesus, crying out in a loud voice, said, "Father, into your hands I commend my spirit." Having said this, he breathed his last. Can you feel the silence? For silence profound is more than the absence of sound. It can be palpable. Can you remember a moment when the feel of silence filled your soul? It may have been an incredible moment in nature where the silence was filled with awe. Or it may have been a vigil remembering the life of one you loved. Or, as Sonia implored us, to honor and remember the sacred life of each beloved child of God killed in an act of hate. Or the more than 2.5 million people who have died from COVID-19 across the globe. The silence that is filled with that much ache sometimes feels too big to contain. But in the magnitude of that silence, sometimes we get a glimpse. We get a glimpse in a moment when we feel overwhelmed, that we do not think for maybe even a period of time of those things which separate us as individuals and groups. But for a moment of sacred silence, we feel connected with the humanity that we share. And on this night, we remember the humanity of Jesus as he breathed his last. And how do we take in that silence? Poet Jan Richardson, in her painted prayer book, says the following: "All too quickly, the breaking of the bread becomes the breaking of the flesh. And all too soon, the cup offered at the table becomes the life poured out at the cross. After the rending, after the emptying, an impossible stillness, an aching silence, an incomprehensible hollow for which no word will ever be adequate. And now, how will we meet this silence? What will we do with this ache?" Richardson offers us some words in a poem that she titles "Still" for Good Friday. After I share this poem, I'm going to invite us to spend some time in sacred silence. And following that, we will share the Lord's Prayer in hushed voices. And then stay in that moment as Nara plays a postlude for us, and we end our evening together. Still, for Good Friday, This day, let all stand still in silence, in sorrow. Sun and moon, be still. Earth, be still. Still the waters, still the wind. Let the ground gape in stunned lamentation. Let it weep as it receives what it thinks it will not give up. Let it groan as it gathers the one who is thought forever stilled. Time, be still. Watch and wait. Still. In hushed voice, we share the Lord's Prayer. Be healed by the music that invites us to leave this space then in peace. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever.